But funny thing about emotions, ignoring them doesn't end them, it just rechannels them, so to speak. They remain and they will have their day. They will be heard one way or the other. When a person undergoes trauma, serious trauma, especially when he or she is very young, the brain hasn't actually physically formed in the head enough to be able to process what happened or is happening, what's ongoing. In short, as you might hear in therapy, it's too much pain for the brain. So what happens? Well, the brain, unable to respond, meaning figure out what happened and how to deal with the emotions arising from that trauma, fear and terror and all of that, it simply does nothing. It shuts off the emotions, it ignores them, and figures out how to live without proper emotional response commensurate to those emotions, to what caused them. It's how a young boy copes with the pain, by ignoring it consciously. This is how the mind protects itself, how it survives. Otherwise, as we see too often, the pain leads to suicide. But funny thing about emotions, ignoring them doesn't end them, it just rechannels them, so to speak. They remain and they will have their day. They will be heard one way or the other. Pain must be soothed. It's part of the nature of pain. It's why the entire field of medicine, for example, exists to treat physical pain. Emotional pain is just as real, sometimes more real. When trauma strikes a life, a few things must be considered. 1, how young was the person? 2, how long did the trauma persist? 3, what lies did the person tell themselves in response to the pain? Such as, I suck, it's my fault, I'm a horrible person, I'm not worthy of being loved. If only they knew the real me, they'd hate me or at least want nothing to do with me. All those kinds of lies become entrenched in your psyche. And for many who undergo severe trauma like childhood rape and psychosexual trauma, this self-view extends even to God and how he views the person. This becomes the walking around self-view, and since it's the person himself who views himself this way, it's unalterable for him alone, like a broken vase cannot repair itself. Outside agency is needed, but there's the rub. The person cannot appeal to outside agency without first acknowledging all of this to himself, and that is simply too much. The person's mind has constructed a self-preservation technique of not looking at these demons because they're just simply too frightening. Too much has to be confronted and admitted. So on his own, it ain't going to happen. What develops is anger, because somewhere down deep in all that emotional turmoil is the sense that I do matter. What happened to me is incredibly unfair. But that never really conscious, or at least for the moment, the fleeting moment, it just never enters into the conscious mind. So the internal war that occurs becomes daily life, and the I suck side is the one that's usually winning. In some 12-step programs meant to address these problems, you'll hear the expression, I got to be friends with my anger, and she told me her name is grief. The inability to grieve the pain of what happened, well, that inspires anger because there's this constant frustration at it. For the child who is a victim of what happened to them, this is how the soul, the mind, the brain, all working together in that mysterious spiritual and material fashion, how they all work together and respond to it. Now let's shift to the self-imposed trauma by an adult who, say, kills their own child through abortion, or someone who participated in that, say the boyfriend. Facing trauma that happened to you, is horrible enough, crippling even. But to have to come to terms with the trauma that arises from looking in the mirror and admitting you butchered your own baby or helped someone do that, imagine the level of anger that must arise from that type of grief, the grief of having actually killed an innocent child, your own child, your child, and most normally, merely for convenience. The left is emotionally ill. The violence that we see from lefties ultimately arises from a grief they cannot bear, which they, of course, embrace because they're the party of death. They are in spiritual turmoil. They believe they cannot grieve because what they've done is so abhorrent it cannot be squarely faced. So they become angry, and then in many, many cases, that anger often erupts into violence. So they take to the streets. They prop up fake causes like Free Palestine, virtue signal every opportunity, set fire to Teslas, key them, burn down portions of cities, topple statues, and so forth. They become addicted, so to speak, to violence and rage to assuage their own grief without ever actually facing it. It's why they're always angry, because it will never be assuaged. This is the underlying truth, the massive undercurrent of American politics right now. The left is emotionally ill because so many of them have trampled the natural law written on their hearts by Almighty God, and they cannot cope with the evil of what they have done or support. Spiritually, they must be prayed for. Absolutely. Politically, this coiled up snake under the table must be called out, and it must be defeated. Coming to you from Houston, Texas, I'm Gary Michael Voris. God love you.